Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off, where for July 1991 the magazines dug deep into the sofa cushions to find something extra. Full, free games. And battling it out are CU Amiga, Amiga Format and the one for Amiga. Fight! We start with Amiga Format, that across 2 discs gave us 2 full games, a rolling demo, a bit of professional software and a bunch of tools. And starting with its first free game we have Archipelagos, which is really the full game as you even have to enter the copy protection. Thankfully they printed out the words in the magazine. And wait, they dedicated 3 pages to this game? Well, I guess it wouldn't be Amiga Format if it wasn't complex. And there's a whole story here, but really, the idea is you get dumped into an archipelago, where you then have to destroy an obelisk. But it's protected by rocks, obviously, so you have to destroy them first. Now this is all done from a first person perspective, and you use the mouse to move around, and you can click on any of the green squares to move to that position. And to break the rocks, you have to click on the land that the rock is on, not the rock itself. And with them taken care of, you can then do the same thing to the obelisk, but you only have 90 seconds to take it down. And when you destroy rocks as well as collect eggs, it will give you energy, and you can use that to clear red squares, so you can then stand on them normally. Or you can create paths across the water, which is something you'll have to do on the later levels, as you'll have to cross the water to find some of the rocks, as you can only turn them into rubble if there's a clear bit of land between them and the obelisk. Now amazingly, there's 10,000 levels. That's not a typo, I've not misspoken here. There is a huge amount of content for you to get through. And they do obviously add in more things as you go along. Now I think it's an interesting title, but it does chug a little bit on the A500. But I don't think there's quite enough there to keep me coming back to try and complete all those levels. Let's take a quick break from the games to see what else Format included on the discs. And to see that we'll have to boot into Workbench first, as both discs will try to auto boot into their respective games. And here we have the typical things for the time. We have a picture of the month. That does look pretty cool. But there's also some tools that might have made more sense in the Workbench 1.3 days. Like there's this one that will pop up whenever you insert a disc to tell you how much free space there is. But there's also an installer for a demo of Wordsworth, which is a powerful word processing software. Or it would be in the full version. In this one, all we can do is write, format, but we can't save or spell check, and it has some very limited printing. So don't expect to use it for anything serious. Which is something that you can also say for the demo for RC Aero Chopper, a wireframe flight sim. Now the full version of this actually came with an AC radio controller, so you could fly around those virtual machines and not break anything when you crash. But in the demo, all you can really do is change the settings and then, well, leave it to play itself, as it's the rolling demo. It's an interesting concept that I don't think translates to a demo all that well. The final tools were mostly aimed at programmers, as there were ones for viewing memory and designing UIs. So let's move on to the second full game for Amiga Format, Vaccine. I think we're at the point now that this shouldn't be a dangerous topic, right? And it's also our second game to require copy protection that you have to pass. And once we do get past it, we get a very bouncy title screen. So let's get into the game and... What's this? Yeah, it's another 3D world, and one I think runs a little bit nicer than the last, even if it is even more confusing than before. The goal in this 3D world is that you have to destroy these viruses, and that is done by firing the same colour balls as them at them. But if you don't get to them in time, a couple of those viruses will get close to each other and then join, and thus become much harder to deal with. To help you, there is the psychic radar, that's meant to help you track down those attackers. Because not only will they join together like mentioned, but they'll also try to attack your bases, and if they destroy them, then it's game over. I've attempted this one quite a few times, and each attempt I don't think I ever really got that far in the game, as just the act of trying to hit those enemies is really quite difficult. Your movement is quite fast and a little bit slippery, so trying to line up those shots can be quite difficult, even more so when they're bouncing around all over the place as well. And if they've joined into chains, then their movement gets even more erratic than before. And on top of all that, by default, your attacks retain the momentum of your movement. So you might be thinking you're firing straight ahead, but instead it goes off to the side, or behind you. Thankfully, it's something you can turn off, which makes lining up the shots a little bit easier, but it's still not particularly great to do. I can see why this one ended up being given away for free, as I can imagine it was quite difficult to show it off in screenshots or even trying to describe what it is on the back of the box. Let's move on to the next magazine, which is the one for Amiga. That again included 2 discs with 2 full games, as well as a little extra. So where else can we start but with the first disc, which is for Atomics. And after the title screen we find a puzzle game, which is a bit like the sliding ice block challenges you'd get in other games, as when you get a part moving it will keep going until it hits something. The goal is to try and recreate that molecule that you can see on the left, with the parts that you have in the level. Which is very much easier said than done. As not only do you need to work out how to get the parts into the right place, you have to do it against an extremely evil time limit. And what makes this worse is if you get this wrong, and you fail, you are kicked back to the start screen. And you then have a long load time to get back into the game. That is, unless you've managed to get yourself a little bit further through, and then you can use some of your points to give yourself an extra continue. But you can burn through those points very quickly. But I get the feeling that this was on purpose, as there's only 30 levels in the game. So how do you make this game last longer? Well, you make it much harder, as you need to make this £20 game seem worthwhile for the cash. But I guess outside of making more levels, there might not have been all that much they could do with the concept. Yes, there's quite a few different parts, but you still are quite limited in how you can put them together, and what else you can put in the levels themselves. Now this is a hard one I find to judge, because if it didn't have that time limit, or if it was at least doubled or tripled, then I would have really enjoyed this, even if it would have made for a short game. But as it stands, it's just a little bit too annoying to constantly fail and get kicked back to that title screen. And talking of being kicked, That little extra that I talked about? Well, it's 3 golden goal replays for Kickoff 2, and I present them to you in all of their golden glory. And let's move on to the final game for the one, which is Puffy's Saga. Not a game that I'd played before, but for some reason the name rang a bell. And after a very detailed title screen that tries to tell you just about everything it can, we are in the game. And this seems to be like a bit of a cross between Pac-Man and Gauntlet. The levels are huge and your health constantly ticks down, just like Gauntlet. But you need to find dots to be able to complete the level, just like Pac-Man. But there's also lots of other things for you to collect as well. Like there's keys that will open doors, and there's other items that you can use as well. But there's also tiles that will do different things, like some will open up areas. Some of them will make you stop for a while and result in you making that face? That's not right. We're not that type of channel. Stop pulling it. Whew. So you really will need to learn what everything will do, just to give you half a chance, because some of those baddies, they will just outright roast you. One cool thing is that you can choose between Puffin and Puffalin. And what is quite interesting is that it's not just a basic sprite swap, as there are a few differences in their stats between them. But it will also mirror and flip the levels, so it does feel quite different. Overall, as a game, it seems fine, but it is way too easy to go in the wrong direction. And some of those levels might seem huge, but the dots are actually really close, so I'm not even sure what the rest of the level is for. And it's quite easy to get heavily punished if you do go exploring, because you might come up against dragons that will really bring your health down, or it might just let out monsters that will just keep flaming and attacking you. Now there are some pickups that can help, like ones that will let you breathe flame, instead of just this weird spit that you have, or making you invisible. But I'm really not sure about this one. I can see why it would have been given away for free, as it might be just a little bit too busy for its own good. So I'm really not sure if I enjoyed this one or not. So while I think about that, let's move on to the final magazine, For Amiga. That over its 2 discs provided just one full game, but 2 demos and a bunch of utilities. And it boots up to a menu that includes the full game as well as the tools, but some of those are on the other disc. And if you select them, it'll tell you to insert that disc, so it's a bit of an odd setup, this one. But let's start off with the demo, which is for PP Hammer. Now this is a game that I know of, but never really played, so let's see what it's all about. And in my first attempt at this game, what it was about was dying a lot, as moving around the world is easy enough, and using the pneumatic hammer is fine. It's just that you need to remember to leave yourself enough space so you can keep drilling down, and do so fast enough that the blocks don't return and kill you. Now this is actually one of the much later levels in the game, so don't expect it to go easy on you. As you'll have to collect all the treasure in the level and then make it to the exit. All while the world is trying to crush you and the timer is constantly ticking down. But there's also rats and ghosts that will try and sap your health. There is a lot of charm to this game, as the animations look lovely and there is quite a few of them that you get to see. But I'm not sure if this demo has really sold me on the game. I did enjoy it even if I died a lot, and just when I thought I was getting going, well, the timer ran out and it was game over. I think starting us off on a slightly easier level might have helped this demo a lot. Didn't need to be the first one, but maybe the third, rather than, say, the 20th, which I think this is. The second demo is for a football game. But you are spared me playing it really badly, as it's a rolling demo instead. Now, I'm not sure if it's just two AIs competing against each other or if it's a recorded game, but I guess it all looks fine enough for a side-on football game. But I think it might be a little bit slow. I'm really not the person to take advice from when it comes to sports games. And I'm also not the person to take advice from the next title either, as it's a demo of Techno Sound Turbo. Now this is an audio sampler program that normally you would use with a dongle to record audio samples. And then you can mess around with them, you can even hook up MIDI hardware and play them back. But as this is a demo, well, we don't have that dongle. We do have a few samples to play around with, and I'm not really sure what I can really do with them other than just load them and play them, as I am a complete noob when it comes to audio and music. So let's move on to the next bit of software, which isn't that much more fun really, as it's a house inventory application. We can enter in all of our possessions and then set how much we insured it for. We can add notes and other things. I think you can run queries and stuff on it as well, but it's really not a tool that I would use all that much. But it is very much something that the CU Amiga would provide, along with a very early version of sysinfo, that you can sort of see how it evolved into that later design that we all know and love. And it's interesting to see just how few Amigas are in the list, as those 600 and 1200s, well, they're not represented yet. But I think it's time to move on to the last full game of the episode, which is Zombie. This is a bit of a sort of puzzle adventure game, but one that's been wrapped up in a party dungeon crawler style game, all while being set in a Day of the Dead setting. So it is quite an interesting premise. As you start off at the top of a shopping centre, with your helicopter that's just run out of fuel. And you and your party have to make it into the building and then try and lock it up so no more zombies can make their way inside. All the while solving puzzles and dispatching zombies that might attack you. You do this by moving around using the on-screen icons and then interacting with the world. Now this might be picking up an object or trying to solve a puzzle. And obviously in those more extreme cases, attempting to dispatch a zombie. Remember, go for the head. Remember, go for the head. Now, as you have a party of 4, you can move them around separately, which can be a little on the slow side due to the load times, as this is all coming off floppy disk. Now, this really is an interesting game. I do like all the little in-jokes and graffiti for the various punk bands. And it does have some quite interesting systems. But this is one that's going to require quite a few attempts to try and get through the game. Because I really feel I'm going to have to use multiple members to try and solve some of the puzzles, and try and work out what everything is as well. As I've really not gotten as far through this game as I'd like. So of everything that we've seen today, this is definitely one that I'll have to come back to. But I think I might have to play a WHD load version because I'm sure that will load a lot faster. Particularly with the number of floors and shops that you have to investigate. There is a lot to learn in this game. And so there we have it, a bit of an odd one this month, as none of the magazines particularly wowed me. But after much consideration, I've decided that in last place it is the one for Amiga. I think Atomics could have been a great game without that time limit and a few more levels. But Puffy Saga, well, it wasn't for me. In second place, I'm going to give it to Amiga Format. Two quite dense games, but it did have some interesting utilities. Which means CU Amiga is first. I think Zombie might have been the best game of the episode, and is one I'll have to come back to, and PP Hammer, well, that would have kept me going for ages. And as always, if you have anything to say about the rankings, and I think this one might result in a few interesting opinions, then let me know down in the comments. Or you can even check us out on the Discord. There'll be links for it on the About page. And if you enjoyed this content, then you can wave those floppy disks in the direction of the like and subscribe button. And until next time, I was the Goldfish. That was some real digging in the bargain bin for some of those free games, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thanks for watching. These videos are always great to make, as it helps me uncover many cool and interesting games that I didn't know about before. And if you liked what you watched, then I've got good news for you, as I've been doing these videos for quite some time now, so you'll be able to check out at least 2 of them on the screen right now. So please give them a go, and I hope to see you again soon.